Hi, I'm personal trainer YUJI.
To build a good body through muscle training, it's better to do this kind of muscle training. It's easy to suggest that you should do a certain number of repetitions consistently. I can say that easily myself. However, if you can actually implement it, it's not such an easy task. When you reach your 40s and 50s, things don't go as smoothly as they used to, and that's very common. Well, I usually guide personal training, and this situation occurs every day, day in and day out. Well, you see, there are things that hinder muscle training in middle age. I call them the anti-health forces, and they are quite scary. These anti-health forces always get in the way when you try to become healthy and engage in muscle training. So, I want to crush these anti-health forces, and today, I aim to tackle the obstacles that interfere with middle-aged individuals. I believe it may seem like a mundane task, but I think it's essential to properly address these seemingly trivial matters. Anyway, it really gets in the way of muscle training in middle age and makes it hard to progress. Since things don't naturally move forward, I want everyone to check and correct these areas properly. There are a few key points to consider, and the first one is that the lower back should not be overly arched. It's about the lower back. If the lower back is arched too much, it is said to cause lower back pain, but originally there is a slight natural arch. Without that slight arch, it becomes problematic. Muscle training itself isn't going well. So, without that lower back arch, you can't perform a squat properly. If you can't arch your lower back and maintain that posture, your squats will end up looking like this. This is really dangerous, and you can't squat any deeper or lift heavier weights. When doing deadlifts, you want to maintain that lower back and back arch, but as you lower the weight, it ends up looking like this. For those who are already struggling, it becomes impossible to perform effective exercises, and the same goes for the back. If you can't arch your back, you'll end up rounding it. Even when trying to break down a bento box, it becomes difficult to engage the back properly. It's not just that, it also involves the pectoralis major. When performing bench press or dumbbell press, if you can't create that lower back arch and back curvature, your shoulders will jut out, causing the focus to shift from the pectoralis major to the shoulders. This arching is essential. Many people in their 40s and 50s struggle with the inability to arch their lower back. I have really solved this issue, but the arch of the lower back and the arch of the spine require both muscle contraction and spinal curvature. If either one is lacking, it won't work. First, the curvature of the spine refers to the bones, right? The spine itself must bend in the direction of the arch, with each vertebra bending individually. If it becomes stiff and doesn't move, it results in a continuous series of rigid segments, which is problematic. Therefore, if the spine itself cannot maintain flexibility and arch properly, it won't work. So, first of all, for a stretch to arch the lower back, you can extend your arms like this. You're just waiting in this position. In this state, the lower back should be relaxed, and while keeping your arms extended, you should lift your chest and face. If the lower back is unable to arch due to pain, it may appear straight like this. There are also people who look like this. Just make sure not to push the lower back down in this position. You need to relax your lower back. At first, it might feel tough to get used to a natural arch in your lower back, but you will gradually adapt to it. To create a natural arch in the lumbar spine, I want you to take your time with this. There are cases where individuals have lumbar flexibility, but their muscles cannot contract. So, while the bones themselves may still be flexible, when performing an exercise like Superman, for instance, when you try to raise your arms, from this position they just won't lift at all. It feels like the chest and arms are completely unable to rise, and this is related to the spine. It's contracting, you see. Anyway, I've really made sure to contract it well. It's about this level, like crawling on the ground. Honestly, right now, I feel like my back is quite rounded. When I get to this point, I really feel the contraction myself. So, I really want this height in my chest and arms. I want it to be high, not just flying low. I want you to be able to lift this Superman properly, so it's essential to effectively engage the erector spinae muscles. This is a classic exercise that has been around for a long time, but you need to do it every day to see results. It's important to achieve both lumbar flexibility and the contraction of the spinal muscles. It's really best to do this frequently, ideally every day. And the second thing that gets in the way is, it's about the tightness in the hamstrings. The hamstrings are really tight, and I think you already know this, but this tightness still interferes with muscle training. This also affects squats, as mentioned earlier about the lower back rounding. The tightness in the hamstrings pulls on the pelvis. When this happens, The hamstrings are stretched, but they end up pulling on the pelvis, causing it to tilt. So, this pulling is what causes the issue. As a result, the pelvis ends up in a position that causes the lower back to round even more. With each descent, it quickly becomes a situation where even the deadlift feels like it's going wrong. Here, the knees are bending in a position where they shouldn't be protruding, but they are bending from a vertical state and becoming more like a squat. This creates quite a bit of tension. However, since this cannot be stretched, the knees end up protruding and loosening, or the pelvis shifts in a way that leads to a lack of stretch, escaping in a direction that doesn't allow for proper extension. So, this is what happens. If the correct posture is not maintained, it becomes difficult to train the lower back and back muscles. Moreover, tightness in the hamstrings can also affect the abdominal muscles. Yes, that's right. Although it may seem unrelated, it does impact the abs. For instance, during leg raises. As you can see, the knees are kept straight. Many people tend to bend their knees when their hamstrings are tight. So, when this area loosens, the abdomen also becomes loose. The knees and hips bend, and the abdomen ends up in a relaxed state. This is when the pelvis is raised in an extended position. When watering, I want to feel like my knees are coming this way, but in reality, the recovery from the navel down is incredibly loose. This is because the force is distributed in this stretched state, so even if the knees don't come in, this position distributes the force better. If the knees bend and release some of that force, it won't work effectively. Additionally, having softer hamstrings allows for better recovery. So anyway, this area of recovery, how does it relate to the hamstrings? I want to make sure I don't do that. That's why I've been doing hamstring stretches, and I would like you to try this. Open your legs front and back. One leg goes forward, and you should spread it a bit wider. Wider, quite wide, and the back leg should be at a slight angle. It shouldn't be vertical. It should always be a little diagonal. Now keep your upper body upright and make sure your toes are firmly planted. Lift your toes up and fully extend your knee. It feels like you're putting both hands down at this point. In a fully extended position with the knees straight, place your hands on the floor. The back leg is not vertical. It is extended backward. In this position, place your hands down. If this is not cramped and is in this position, the hamstrings at the back of the thigh will stretch. The back of the knee will extend. In this state, with the toes lifted and the heels on the ground while both hands are down, it can be painful behind the knee. It is painful behind the knee, but I want to hold this position for 30 seconds. Of course, you will do this on both sides, but make sure to alternate between the front and back. It's open, isn't it? From this position, we will lift Matsuki and place our hands down, which is the first stage. Right now, it feels like we are stretching around the hamstrings or the area behind the knees. Next, we will slightly change this. We will enter a similar position as before, but let's assume this position now. The soles of the feet can be placed down, and you can be careful with your toes. Bend your knees slightly. Now bend them the other way. Bend and place your hands inside, with your elbows coming under your knees, and go as far as you can until your palms touch. Now your legs are extended forward and backward. In this position, if you already place your palms down with your elbows in, it will feel quite tense. Now, in this position, your knees are bent. If anything, you should focus on the middle. The area just below the hip joint is quite engaged. In this position, with your hands on the ground just a little, gently move the pelvis back and forth. Just a small movement of about 2 cm, but you can feel a stretching pain at the base here. Now let's stretch the upper part of the hamstrings by working on the back of the knee, while continuing to move the pelvis back and forth by about 2 cm. Of course, we will alternate sides as well. Insert the elbows and hands and continue moving back and forth. Stretch the base of the hamstrings. Well, I don't know the number of repetitions. The repetitions are already. Isn't 30 times enough? If you shake it like this for about 30 seconds to a minute, the base will start to stretch. So, it's about stretching that area. Well, in that sense, we need to do both the straightened and bent knee exercises. This will help you properly stretch the hamstrings. And there's one more thing. It seems that the shoulders are tight. Yes, this shoulder tightness is really quite a hindrance. Well, the issue with tightness is that, basically, the arms can't go up or are difficult to raise. If it becomes even harder to lift them, you can imagine what happens. The arms just won't go up. It's simply a problem if the arms can't be raised, right? I don't want to feel that way as I get older, so I want to be able to lift my arms, but because they are tight, when I try to do a shoulder press, I end up leaning forward. No matter how I try, it's tight, so I can't go any further back, and I end up leaning forward. As a result, the arms don't align properly. It's not just about whether you go or not, it's about the shoulders not being able to move properly. If the shoulders are stiff and don't move much, then when you're doing back rowing exercises, your back won't contract properly. The back doesn't shrink like it should. If it doesn't move, it ends up getting stuck in a rigid position. Because it's locked up, the areas you want to move won't move, leading to improper rowing techniques. This applies to barbell exercises as well. If someone can move properly, they first need the flexibility to raise their arms. I'm not really sure about the name, but it's called the cat stretch. It starts from a position that's a bit further away from being on all fours. Now let's spread out the single blade. From here, pull back strongly as if a cat is stretching. Raise your face a little and glance forward. Keep your palms firmly on the floor with your wrists and keep your elbows extended. With your elbows down, feel the stretch in your sides, chest, and the base of your chest, as well as in your sides. You can also feel your chest and sides pressing against the floor. Gently bounce this area while exhaling lightly.
It feels like bending the elbow to create a mound, so while firmly pressing around the wrist, you should bounce gently to stretch the sides. As your arms rise, it looks healthy for the upper back distribution. The scapula and the area around the spine also stretch. It feels like arching, and you should do a light bounce. Please make sure to stretch this area well. Additionally, this can be done whether you are standing or sitting. It might be, but for now, let's get into this position. Now, let's interlock our fingers. Once your hands are interlocked, please pull your shoulders back. This movement works quite well. This is the range of motion. From a neutral state where I'm not exerting any force, I will open up properly. Open up properly. By doing this, we will work on opening the clavicle. There are two clavicles, right? You want to open the 2 points at the inner ends of these. I want you to make sure these 2 points open well. Once they are opened, just hold the stretch for a while. Keep it like this. Just hold it. Basically, you just need to open the front, I think. You will probably feel it most around the base of the clavicle. This area can get quite tight due to posture or work, and sometimes it becomes stiff and won't open. In this state, the same goes for the back we talked about earlier. And for the chest, this condition is where it all starts. So, like this, the dumbbell press will end up like this, right? I want to do the dumbbell pose in this position. Therefore, make sure to open this area properly. Simply interlocking your fingers, pull your shoulders back, and open the front of your shoulders. Focus on opening the area where the shoulder connects to the clavicle. And even more, while keeping your fingers interlocked, can we align the shoulders from here? Instead of moving the shoulders forward, think of moving them diagonally up and back. Interlock your hands and rotate them as far as you can. Diagonally backward and upward, within your range. Keep your elbows from bending too much and rotate your shoulders while maintaining an extended position. This can be quite challenging. I believe this will really stretch the area around the current joint. Rotating your shoulders in this position should be done frequently, and do not let your abdomen escape. The abdomen is not related to this. We'll be moving the shoulders in a circular motion. Additionally, there is also the flexibility of the shoulder itself. There is also the issue that a person may not contract at all, which leads to the problem of the scapula not contracting and thus the shoulder press not being able to go up. Remember the Superman we did earlier? When doing the Superman, I want you to have a different awareness this time. This different awareness means, well, you know, when you lift your chest and shorten the spine, pay attention to the height of your hands. It's important to keep the upper body firmly fixed here. While the height of the upper body may be the same, the difference between this position and that position is significant. This isn't about low flying. I want to raise my elbows fully extended. At this height, the contraction of the trapezius is quite different. The contraction of the trapezius is different. I think it will feel quite tight in both areas here. Just make sure to extend your elbows anyway. You should hold the position for about 30 seconds or as long as you can. If possible, extend your elbows to reach this height. I want you to do a Superman like that. Each of you may find it easier to do exercises like the dumbbell press or pull-ups, which you usually do. While these may seem quite simple compared to those, if your lower back is arched and your shoulders are tight, flashy heavy strength training won't be effective. As I mentioned earlier, if you can't maintain the correct position, it won't work properly. If you don't do it, your muscles won't develop, so it's important to focus on this area. I want you to correct your movements against unhealthy habits and perform strength training with the correct movements, gradually increasing the weight. If you don't do this, once you reach middle age, you'll find that strength training really doesn't progress at all. It won't progress at all. Even if you say your strength isn't improving, it's because you're not addressing these fundamental issues. So, make sure to focus on this and spend just a little time, about 5 to 10 minutes, stretching before your training. Let's get started. I hope you can do it like that, and even on days when you don't have training, I want you to make sure to do it for at least 5 minutes while watching TV. Even just that, after a few months or half a year, you will see significant changes. So please keep it up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm also on Instagram, so please follow me there as well. This was your personal trainer, Yuri. Go, go,